There's a bottle in your kitchen right now that can kill the bacteria in contaminated water. It costs under $1. You probably have it on the shelf nearest your stove or tucked into the back of a cabinet you open without thinking twice. It has been killing waterborne bacteria for over 3,000 years. Armies carried it on campaigns through deserts and mountain passes. Doctors prescribed it before doctors had offices or degrees. Sailors drank it on crossings that took 4 months without a single port. And the moment the water treatment and purification industry grew large enough to have shareholders and lobbyists and a marketing budget that rivals the economy of entire countries, it vanished from every public conversation about clean water. Not because it stopped working. That is the one thing they never say out loud. They stopped talking about it because it works exactly as well as it always has. It costs almost nothing, and it cannot be metered through a branded system, filtered through a cartridge with a replacement schedule, or shipped to your door on a subscription. You cannot build a $200 billion industry on something that has been sitting in your pantry the whole time. The global water treatment and purification market was valued at over $280 billion in 2023. It is projected to cross $450 billion before the end of this decade. Those numbers come from the same industry documents the filter companies and the municipal water authorities use when they stand in front of investors. At the same time, the World Health Organization publishes a different number. 2 billion people on this planet drink water contaminated with fecal bacteria every single day. Not in a distant past. Right now. This year. This week. And buried inside every one of those industry growth reports, underneath the forecasts and the expansion targets, is the part they never lead with. The majority of bacterial waterborne illness could be addressed with inexpensive, already available methods. The knowledge is not missing. The discovery has not been delayed. The solution is just not profitable enough to promote when you are trying to sell a filtration unit that requires a new cartridge every 90 days and an installation appointment. This is not a conspiracy. It is simpler than that. It is arithmetic. A solution that costs under $1 does not generate a $280 billion market. That is not malice. That is math. And that math has been making decisions about your water, your health, and your money for decades without asking your permission once. I'm not going to tell you this is a new invention. Ancient Egyptian texts, carved and written around 3000 BC, describe the use of soured wine and fermented grain liquid to clean wounds, preserve stored food, and treat water held for long journeys. That is not legend. That is inscription on surfaces that survived 4,000 years. The Roman legions who crossed into Gaul, into Britain, across North Africa, and through the heat of the Levant, carried their daily drinking water in flasks, mixed with what they called posca, a diluted vinegar solution. Not wine, not water alone, vinegar water. Because Roman military physicians had learned through decades of watching their own armies that the soldiers who drank posca got fewer stomach illnesses on campaign than the soldiers who filled their flasks from local rivers and streams without treatment. They did not know the word bacteria. They did not have a microscope. They had outcomes. And they chose the better outcome, wrote it into military supply doctrine, and carried it forward for centuries. Hippocrates, the Greek physician practicing on the island of Kos around 460 BC, documented his use of diluted vinegar. He called it oxymel when he mixed it with honey, for patients suffering from infections and fevers. He prescribed it as a drink. He applied it to wounds that were festering. He wrote it all down. 2,500 years before the first antibiotic was synthesized in a laboratory, the most careful clinical observer in the ancient world was writing formal prescriptions for diluted vinegar and watching his patients recover. Japanese warriors, more than 13 centuries after Hippocrates, carried rice vinegar as standard campaign equipment alongside their weapons. Medieval European physicians in the 14th century recorded vinegar as a preventive measure during plague years, not because they understood the mechanism, because they had watched the results accumulate across generations of use and the results were consistent. Every civilization that worked with fermentation stumbled onto the same tool. Every civilization that used it kept using it. That pattern alone tells you something important. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. When you pour vinegar over a salad, the bacteria on the surface of those leaves do not survive contact. That is not seasoning. That is chemistry working invisibly in your kitchen the same way it has worked for 3 millennia. When a jar of pickles sits sealed on a shelf for 2 full years without refrigeration and opens fresh and safe, that is vinegar holding a perfect barrier against every bacterium that settles on the surface of the brine. When a bottle of hot sauce with vinegar as its base never grows mold no matter how long it sits uncapped at room temperature, that is the same acid maintaining the same barrier it has always maintained. You already knew this was real. You have been watching the proof of it in your own kitchen your entire adult life. The only step you had not taken was applying it deliberately to water you were unsure about. Once you do that, it stops being a fact about salad dressing and becomes a tool you carry. Here's what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. You need 1 bottle of plain white distilled vinegar. Before you buy it, look at the label. You want the kind that says 5% acidity. Almost every store brand white distilled vinegar sold anywhere in the world lists 5% on the label. A standard bottle at any grocery store, any dollar store, any convenience mart will cost between 80 cents and $1.20. That is the primary ingredient. You need a clean container to hold the water you are treating. A glass jar is best because you can see through it clearly. A clean plastic pitcher works. A food-safe bucket works for larger volumes. You need the water itself. Tap water you are uncertain about, well water, collected rainwater, stream water, whatever source you are working with. Optional but worth having, a pack of pH testing strips, the kind sold in aquarium supply sections or health food stores, for about $3 for 30 strips. They are not required. They remove doubt. That is genuinely it. Under $5 total if you buy the strips, under $2 if you don't. Here's the one thing most people get wrong. They add a small splash of vinegar to a large container of water, stir it once, and drink it within 5 minutes. What failure looks like is this. The water has a faint sour smell. Nothing else seems changed. The bacteria in that water are still alive. You gave them a brief, mild shift in their environment, and then delivered them directly into your body. That is not water treatment. That is water flavoring. The bacteria were not disrupted. The acid was too thin and too brief to do its work. You feel fine for a few hours, and then you don't. What success looks like is different in every sensory way. The water is perfectly clear. It smells clean and slightly sharp, the way the inside of a sealed pickle jar smells in the half second before the lid fully breaks the seal. It has had time to sit covered and undisturbed. The acid has moved through every part of the volume and done what it does. The bacterial cell walls, think of them as soap bubbles, thin and fragile membranes that hold the internal structure of the bacterium together the way a balloon holds air, have been disrupted by the acetic acid moving through the water around them. When that disruption happens, the bacteria cannot maintain their form. The membrane breaks, the internal structure collapses. The organism is no longer functional. It is no longer a threat to anything. The fix is one sentence. 1 tablespoon of white distilled 5% vinegar per liter of water. Stir thoroughly for 30 seconds. Cover and let it stand undisturbed for 30 minutes. Here is every step in the order that matters. First, pour the vinegar into the empty container before you add the water. 1 tablespoon per liter. A liter is roughly the same volume as the large sports bottle you take to the gym. The tall one that fits in your hand with your fingers just reaching around it. If you are treating 2 liters, use 2 tablespoons. If you have a 5-liter container, use 5 tablespoons. Vinegar goes in first, always. When you pour water in on top of the vinegar, the mixing distributes itself throughout the whole volume naturally as the water falls in. If you add vinegar to an already full container of water, it concentrates at the top. You stir, and you still end up with uneven distribution, patches of near-neutral water where bacteria can survive the treatment. Vinegar first removes that problem at the start before it can begin. Second, add the water. Pour it in with a steady stream, not a violent splash. Watch the 2 liquids combine. The water may look faintly hazy for a moment as the liquids find their even mix. Then it clears. That is normal. If it does not clear within 30 seconds, the water itself has very high sediment content and needs pre-filtering through a clean cloth before treatment. Third, stir or gently shake the container for 30 seconds. The motion you want is the same motion you use to dissolve salt in a glass of water, a slow, steady, sweeping stir that reaches the bottom of the container and every corner of it. You are not creating foam. You are distributing the acid evenly through every cubic centimeter of the volume. 30 seconds of thorough stirring is enough. After that, the acid continues to distribute on its own through normal liquid movement. Fourth, cover the container tightly. Set a timer for 30 minutes. Do not open it, do not drink from it, do not stir it again during this window. The 30-minute mark is the floor. 45 minutes is better. An hour is more thorough. But 30 minutes at normal indoor temperature, the temperature of a room you would sit comfortably in, is the documented minimum at which acetic acid at this concentration disrupts the 3 most common bacteria responsible for waterborne illness worldwide. E. coli, which causes severe intestinal illness, is disrupted within 20 minutes at this concentration. Salmonella, which causes fever and days of sickness, follows within 25. Listeria, which is one of the more stubborn bacterial contamination threats, requires the full 30. Give it 30. The timer costs you nothing. If the air around the container is cold, below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature of a refrigerator interior or a shaded outdoor space in winter, extend the wait to 45 minutes. Cold slows every chemical reaction slightly, the same way cold slows the rising of bread dough. The treatment still works. It just needs a little more time when the temperature drops. Fifth, when the timer ends, smell the water before you drink it. Hold the container near your face and breathe in slowly. The water should smell clean and slightly sharp. like lemonade without the sugar, like the air inside a sealed pantry jar of something preserved. Clean, tart, stable. There should be no muddy smell, no sulfur smell, no earthy or swampy heaviness, no organic warmth that reminds you of soil or decay. If you detect any of those, the water had more biological load than one treatment cycle addressed. Do not discard the treatment already done. Add another tablespoon of vinegar, stir again, cover again, and wait another 30 minutes. The second cycle will finish what the first cycle started. Sixth, if you have pH testing strips, dip one in for 3 seconds, pull it out, and hold it next to the color chart on the packaging. You are looking for a reading between 4 and 5. On most strip color charts, that zone shows as a yellow or pale yellow-green. pH 4 to 5 is the acidity range, where the acetic acid is present in sufficient concentration to have done its full work throughout the water. If the strip reads above 5, meaning the color lands in a greener or more neutral zone, the vinegar you used was slightly weaker than labeled, or you used a fraction less than a tablespoon. Add half a tablespoon more, stir, wait 10 more minutes, and retest. If you do not have testing strips, here is the physical test. Pour a quarter cup into a separate clear glass, any cup. Hold it up to a window or a lamp. The water should be perfectly clear, transparent. Nothing floating, no cloudiness, no yellowish tint. Then take a small sip and hold it on your tongue for 2 or 3 seconds before swallowing. You are looking for a mild, clean tartness. Not harsh, not stinging, not unpleasant in any way that makes you pull back. The same clean, slight sharpness you know from a light vinegar dressing on a salad, diluted much further, sitting softly on the tongue and gone within a second. That is the taste of successfully treated water. That is what the chemistry feels like when it has finished its work. If the taste is a concern, after the full 30-minute treatment window is complete, stir in the smallest possible pinch of baking soda, the kind in any orange box from any store. A pinch is what you can pick up between the tip of your thumb and one finger. Stir it in gently. It will fizz briefly as the baking soda reacts with the remaining free acid in the water. That fizzing is the pH rising back toward neutral, taking most of the tartness with it. The treatment is already complete at this point. The bacteria were already disrupted during the 30-minute window. The baking soda is not undoing anything. It is only adjusting the flavor after the work is done. Do not add baking soda during the treatment window. The acid needs to be present and active for the full 30 minutes first. Add baking soda only after the timer is ended. 1 liter, 1 tablespoon. 30 minutes, that is your unit. Now let's move the numbers around. A family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, needs roughly 4 liters of safe drinking water per day for drinking and cooking, not including bathing. 4 liters requires 4 tablespoons of vinegar. 1 standard 32-ounce bottle of white distilled vinegar holds slightly more than 100 tablespoons. 1 bottle treats 25 full days of daily drinking water for a family of 4. At $1.20 per bottle, a family of 4 covers nearly a month of clean drinking water for under 5 cents per day total. 3 bottles, costing under $4, covers nearly 3 months. That arithmetic does not require a calculator. You can run it in your head at the store while you're standing in the aisle. Now scale it outward. 10 families, 40 people living in an area without reliable clean water access, a rural community, a remote region, a neighborhood after a flood. 10 bottles of vinegar, roughly $12 total, treats 3 months of daily drinking water for all 40 of them. Less than the cost of 1 replacement cartridge for a name-brand home filtration system. Less than a tenth of what 40 people would spend on bottled water from a grocery store for the same period. The scale does not get less compelling as it grows. It becomes more compelling because the ingredient is everywhere. White distilled vinegar is available in every country on this planet that has a grocery store, a market stall, or a supply chain of any kind. There's no specialized equipment required to obtain it. There's no professional installation required to use it. There's no power source required to run it. Think about what happens when that supply chain disrupts. A hurricane makes landfall. The municipal water treatment facility loses power. The taps run, but the water carries bacteria from infrastructure that broke under the storm surge. Stores sell out of bottled water within the first 2 hours. Filtration units need electricity that no one has. Purification tablets are gone from every shelf in the county. And sitting sealed in a plastic bottle in a cabinet 3 feet above where the floodwater stopped is $1.20 worth of white vinegar that will treat 30 liters of water collected from the rain that is still falling outside into the barrel on the porch. 30 liters. Enough drinking water for a family of 4 for 7 days. From 1 bottle, from 1 shelf, requiring nothing that runs on power, nothing that needs a cartridge, nothing that requires anyone to approve your access or deliver it to you. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. There are places this works less well, and you need to know them precisely, because the credibility of everything else in this video depends on not overselling what the method does. Acetic acid is effective against bacteria. That is its documented strength and its documented boundary. It is significantly less effective against viruses. Viruses are not built the way bacteria are built. A virus does not have the same kind of cell wall that acetic acid disrupts. Norovirus, hepatitis A, and rotavirus, three of the most common waterborne viruses responsible for human illness, are not reliably eliminated by this treatment alone. If you are treating water from a source that may have been contaminated by human sewage, a flooded urban area, a source downstream from a waste discharge point, any source where human biological material may be present, you need to combine this with boiling first. Boil the water, let it cool to room temperature, and then apply the vinegar treatment as a second layer. Boiling handles viruses, vinegar handles the bacteria. Together, they cover the full biological threat. Vinegar does nothing to dissolved metals, lead from old pipes, arsenic from agricultural land, manganese from certain geological formations. These are chemical contamination, not biological contamination. Acetic acid does not capture a metal ion or pull it out of solution. If your concern is metal contamination rather than bacterial contamination, you need a different approach for that problem. This tool is specifically a biological tool. Water that is visibly turbid, too cloudy or silty to see through clearly in a drinking glass, should be poured through a clean folded cloth or a layer of clean sand packed into a bucket with holes at the bottom before treatment. Bacteria can attach themselves to suspended particles and ride inside the particles, effectively shielded from contact with the acid in the water around them. The acid reaches the open water. It does not reach inside a clump of silt. Removing the particles before treatment means the acid reaches everything. This step takes 5 minutes and costs nothing. Do it before you treat, not after. Those are the exact limits. Bacteria, yes. Viruses, combined with boiling. Metals, different tool. Turbid water. Filter the silt first. Within those lines, this method carries 3,000 years of consistent, documented, field-tested results from every corner of the inhabited world. A Roman soldier carried his pasca from Rome to Carthage in summer heat that would have turned untreated river water dangerous within an afternoon. He arrived. He was not sick. The soldiers in his cohort who carried the same flask arrived the same way. The ones who drank from streams without treatment did not always make it to the next march. The Egyptian physician who diluted soured wine into the water before giving it to patients in a city of 2 million people was not guessing at an untested idea. He was following records. Hippocrates wrote his prescriptions in ink that survived 2,500 years of burial in fire and war. The samurai carried their rice vinegar the same way they carried every other piece of equipment essential to surviving in the field. Not as a luxury, not as a curiosity, but as a tool they had decided they could not function without. The Roman soldiers' water did what it did. The Egyptian physician's water did what it did. The samurai's water did what it did. Yours will too. The chemistry was always there. It was just waiting for someone to open the pantry. I don't know what brought you here. It doesn't matter. It works either way.